Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Learn to Discern Spring 2021 webinar series. This is the third this spring that we have done, and it is Anti-Social Media, the End of Privacy. So if you will please mute your mic and turn your cameras off, we'll get started in just a second. Um, Hello and welcome again, our presenters. I'm Kimberly Cox. I'm an instructor of government, and our other presenter is Misty Wilson-Meritens, our social sciences chair. Hi, Misty.
Hi, sorry, I was having a little
That's
technical problem.
that's okay. I'm right there with you this morning. I don't know what the problem is, but yeah. So as we start this, I wanted to ask, and where does the right to privacy exist in our Constitution, or does it? Because I don't think a lot of people know.
So this is something that we talk about a lot, and everyone says, oh, my right to privacy, but it's not in the Constitution. If you read the Constitution the way James Madison wrote it, the right to privacy is not in there. We have built our beliefs about the right to privacy through several court cases, the most important probably being Griswold versus Connecticut in 1965, and that is a picture on the side of that case. And then also from the Ninth Amendment, which is the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be constructed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. This is a catch-all. This is a what if Madison forgot something? And what he forgot is the right to privacy. When you think about James Madison, he was living 2 miles from his nearest neighbor. Privacy was not top of mind to him, but it's something that we in our modern world think about a lot.
So do we now, since most people didn't even know we probably don't have a right to privacy in the Constitution, do we understand our privacy rights? What do we think about them in the digital age?
So this is something that people know is a problem and they're concerned about it. What you're seeing here is data from Pew Research. And what I want to point out to you guys is these are the top 5 concerns that people have about their information. But you can see that these concerns are kind of vague. So I'm concerned about how much data is being collected, but I don't have a specific concern about what it's going to be used for or how they're getting it. So this is something that Americans are aware enough of to know that it's a problem, but we're not well versed enough to be able to articulate exactly what our concerns are. And we're only a few years into this. So really this is a new issue and we're all kind of playing catch up to really understand what's going on.
So are you kind of saying that people know it's an issue, but they don't know what the issue is, so they just kind of go, oh, well,
Exactly.
I can't do much about it, so oh well.
Exactly.
That's kind of scary. What type of data then is being collected? What are these big companies, like we've got the icons there, what are they doing?
So this is all data that's coming from Business Insider, and there are 4 categories of data that's being collected. So the first one I think is the one that we all are more aware of, personal data. To sign up for Facebook, Google, any website, to buy something online, I need to give them my name, my physical address, my credit card number. Sometimes they ask for a phone number. Some of that seems pretty benign, but there's also times you're filling out websites and it asks for your social security number. So you just want to be aware that all of that's being collected and know what it's being used for. The second is engagement data. This is the one that Facebook is really interested in. Engagement data is how long you're on a certain website, what you're clicking on, how long you're staying there, and again, the more time that you're on that website, the better it is for them. Behavioral data is what you purchase, when, how often. That data can be very, very, very informative about your life. There was a study done, I think it's almost 4 years ago now, about Target and how they're able to really target people with their ads based on what they've bought previously. So sometimes you'll start getting ads from Target to buy baby stuff before you've even told anybody else you're pregnant, but Target already knows. And then last is your attitudinal data. This is your customer satisfaction, what you believe, what products you are going to be emotionally attached to. If we're talking about politics, sometimes that's going to be what you're sharing, who you're supporting, who you're liking on various websites. But basically anything you do online just know every click you make, somebody is tracking that somewhere.
I think too, one of the things like you going through this really hit me is I just realized like I have a Twitter account, but I follow stuff on it, but I don't really post. But if I'm not on there for a while, or an Instagram account that I have that if I'm not on there for a while, I get emails like, "Hey, you haven't been on."
Yes.
So it's not only while you're on, it's while you're not on that they're tracking you, which I think is crazy.
Yeah, I deleted Facebook. I mean, I still have it, but I don't ever get on it. And they send me an email every single day. Look what you're
Oh God.
missing.
So that's the scary part to me. So do you have any examples of this, of what we've been talking about?
Yes. So this is a really easy one to do. You can do it right now as I walk you through it. So if you're on a web browser, just open up a new one. Or if you're watching this on the Teams downloaded app, open Google. At the top of your Google, you have a little circular icon. It's usually got your picture there. Click that. That's your avatar. Scroll down to Manage Account. Then look for. Sorry, we have virtual kindergarten going on over here.
That's okay. I think a lot of people are in that boat.
So then click Privacy and Personalization, and then look at your ad personalization. So this is what Google knows about you, what they've tracked, and what they're targeting your ads. So I did this yesterday and looked at mine, and it had my age pretty dead on. It had where I lived in the United States pretty dead on, and it had my political leanings pretty dead on. That's not information I've ever necessarily told Google, but from tracking what I've clicked on, they now know what they can present to me that is likely to get me to click again.
I
So
know
if
it
you
can.
guys do that, type in the chat box anything you found that was surprising.
Yeah, and I know if you turn it off, because mine's been turned off for a while. My husband is in IT and cyber stuff, so he has locked down our computers at home. But if you turn it off, after we were talking about this, I went on and checked mine, turned it back on, and because I've had it off for so long, all that data was gone, if that makes sense. So if you
Mm-hmm.
do, from my experience, if you do turn it off and leave it off for a while, go back on and turn it on and just kind of check and see if all that stuff is gone.
Another thing I checked out before we did this webinar is I have Google tracking on my phone for Google Maps, and I personally have that on there. I leave that on there for a reason. But I went and I looked at it, and it showed me 4 years ago I had a wreck in Tennessee, and I was stuck on the side of the highway for 3 years. And Google had me on the highway in Tennessee for 3 years, not moving. So it's that specific as to what's happening and what they're tracking.
That's really scary.
So I want to ask you, Kimberly, as a lawyer, what federal laws exist that are regulating this kind of thing?
Not a lot. I mean, it looks like there's a lot on the screen, but there's really not. You have the Federal Trade Commission, which will protect consumer information, and they promote competition too. So there's kind of this back and forth between the businesses and consumers. But they'll stop unfair, deceptive, or fraudulent practices within the marketplace. So basically, between when you're buying things. And then you have the Federal Trade Commission Act, which is 1914. What you think about, that's really old. It regulates unfair or deceptive commercial practices as well. They amended it. I don't have it up there, but the U.S. Safe Web Act amends it. But again, it doesn't provide a ton of protection. The ECPA, the next one, is from 1986. Again, fairly old, and it's going to protect wire, oral, and electronic communications from unauthorized interception, access, use, and disclosure. So that's kind of the technical piece of it. And then the CAN-SPAM Act of 2003, at least a little bit newer. It's the newest one I have listed on there. Establishes requirements for, say, a company, you subscribe to a company like, I don't know, Pottery Barn, I'm just throwing out one or whatever, and they send you those emails, hey, look what we got, or Wayfair or whatever. You can unsubscribe to those. The reason is because of this act in 2003. So it spells out like penalties for the companies if they don't provide that unsubscribe, or say you hit unsubscribe a bunch of times and they don't unsubscribe you, they can get in trouble for that under the CAN-SPAM Act. And then lastly, the ECPA of 1986, that last one on the list, it also protects wire, oral, and electronic communications while you're making them. So while you're actually transmit in transition and when they are stored on computers. So like, say AT&T picks up data and it's stored somewhere on their server, it's protected, that type of thing. So there's civil rights and civil liberties protections built into that particular act. But overall, it's kind of sketchy. The FTC, if you're curious, and it's not on the slide, but go to ftc.gov and they have a blog post, and some of the things they talk about, I was looking on there yesterday just for some updated ones, and they have a bunch of stuff on romance scams, and how expensive they were. They had an identity awareness week, which was kind of cool, like protecting your identity and how to do that. And they have a privacy con, like a conference coming up in 2020, July of this year, where they're going to talk about all this stuff, privacy laws and updates. So if you're really interested more in this, it's free, it's open to the public, and you can go on their site and sign up for it coming up this summer. So I thought that was kind of neat. Whoops, sorry. Technical difficulties moving forward. Apologize.
So if we look at our past history of data laws in the United States, what can we say about our data laws specifically as a nation?
They're old. I mean, if you really look at it, I mean, look at the timeline. I mean, and I don't have all the ones I listed. This is kind of the very where we start to see it is the U.S. Privacy Act in 1974. And most of you guys probably have heard of HIPAA because we've all gone to the doctor, I hope. So 1996 is the HIPAA Privacy Act. That's where, doctors' offices, for example, have to protect all your medical information, et cetera. But going forward, the COPA one, that one, has to do with child privacy and all. But again, it's really old stuff. We have not updated these laws in a really long time, which I think is extremely unfortunate.
So when we're looking at the consequences here, I think we all know that there are some vague consequences, but can you put this in economic terms for us?
Yeah, and I think, I have California there at the top. And why they're at the top, and I didn't mention this the other I probably should have on the history, is California has what's called the CCPA. It's like the gold standard in the US for laws. So even with them being being, I guess, the best, they still get hit with a lot of fraud and privacy complaints. You can see up there 50,000. And that's with having one of the strictest state laws in place. I mean, there's no overreaching US privacy law when it comes to protecting our data, et cetera, and what we're doing online. So state by state, this is happening. But even with that, you've got California, Nevada, Maine, and now Virginia are the four that are actually more on top of this. You can see Texas right there ranks third with 27,000 plus. And as far as complaints log, this is the FBI's data, by the way, and we're fourth in dollar, and that's 221 million. You're looking at a ton of money. So there are real world consequences. The FBI, if you go on their site, you can go to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's the IC3, which you'll see in that little graphic there. They saw the highest number of complaints and the highest dollar losses since the center was established in May of 2000 in 2019. So 2019 was the highest ever in the last like almost 20 years. So they received 467 approximately thousand complaints and $3.5 billion losses total to individuals and businesses. And so when you look at all this data, if you go to their site, which I highly encourage you to do, the most costly of these consequences were business and email compromises, including romance or confidence fraud, spoofing, or mimicking, like say they mimic that they're your bank trying to get data from you, private information from you, or they say, oh, we're the Social Security office, we would like your information. No, they're not. Probably Social Security office won't do that. IRS won't do that. But that's where most of them are coming from. So for example, just social media costs, and this does not include the romance figures that I mentioned in there, romance fraud, just social media costs, this in 2019 was $78 plus million, just social media. And that didn't include like identity theft or crimes against children or credit card fraud or any of the others. And you can find all this data on that IC3 FBI slide or website, whatever we call the thing.
And you just said crimes against children. Can you explain that real quick? Because I think when most of us hear crimes against children, we think like assault or violence, and that's not necessarily what we're talking about here, right?
It can be. It's that one is a super broad category. It's they define it broadly as exploitation of children, including child abuse. So anything like taking it can be ranged from taking a child's data, which I'll talk about here in a second. TikTok is being sued for that in a bunch of countries around the world. Taking a child's data, which they aren't supposed to do anywhere in the world, even here. Identity theft of children, which they'll then use when they get to be 18 to build a mock person to then destroy your credit. Sexual exploitation online, all that kind of stuff. So any exploitation of children online or their data.
Okay, so with the federal government not really offering us much protection and the need for those laws to be updated, do we have a lot of protections at the state level?
Again, not really. I mean, it's kind of sad. And I'll look, we'll get to another graphic here in a minute, where an independent group did a study on different like Twitter and Amazon and Facebook and how they did. But because the model within the US is competition, business competition, there really isn't. So again, California's consumer law is the gold standard. That they're kind of the first ones that kind of did this. And they were 2018. I was trying to think of the year. Texas, where we stand, because we're living in Texas, I want to hit that one. They passed HB, which is House Bill 4390 in 2019, and all it did was set up an advisory protection group or council to look at privacy in Texas and how they could protect Texans. So they looked at it. This bill updated also the Texas Identity Theft Enforcement Protection Act. But within that act, there was a lack of privacy law protection, which was weird to me. It's like, what's the purpose of it? So even in Texas, we don't have a whole lot of protection. There is overall, like in all states, there's usually a Student Data Privacy Act that'll apply. Your medical records privacy acts, like Texas has one specifically, but also HIPAA. There's in Texas we have a Biometric Privacy Act, and then also there's a Identity Theft Enforcement and Protection Act. So there are some, but they're state by state, and there's no uniformity, if that makes sense.
So when we're looking at Texas specifically, do you think this is a case of our legislature members not being up with the times? Or do you think this is just technology is moving so fast we're having a hard time catching up?
Both. And I think Texas is such a business friendly state that there's this pull with interest groups that are business minded versus consumers and individuals, if that makes sense. And I think you have lobby groups that are really strong in Texas that are lobbying against some of this protection. Watch Facebook. What was it? They were all, Zuckerberg was testified before Congress recently, and some of the answers he gave were so vague. I get it. He doesn't want to get sued. He doesn't want Facebook to get sued, but they're extremely vague. I think Twitter's, I'm forgetting his name, Twitter's head, Dorsey, was the most, yeah, he was the most upfront about what's going on. But the rest of them were kind of like, But in Texas, that HB, that bill, the House bill I just mentioned, they actually put forth the report this legislative season to the legislature. So we'll find out, I guess, if they're going to do anything this year with it in our state legislature. Our legislature is meeting right now. If you don't have Texas government, they're actually in session. It's the regular session. But the Texas Identity Theft Enforcement Protection Act did update some things. It basically added a deadline. So now a company, if they have a breach, like remember the data breach Target had, where like people, when they scan their credit cards, a bunch of data got stolen. I think that's a few years back. But now if that happens, effective this year or effective 2020, January 2020, they have 60 days. A business would have 60 days to determine that a breach has occurred and then to notify the Texas Attorney General. And it only applies if 250 individuals or more were impacted by that breach, if that makes sense. So there's some notifications they have to do. They have to tell like how they're going to fix it, when they're going to fix it, how they notified people that it happened. So that's basically what Texas is doing right now.
So with our federal laws being a little behind and our state laws being a little bit behind, if we could wave a magic wand and just fix it, who would be our model? Where would we go to find some really good privacy laws?
I mean, I think to start with, we could, if we don't want to go as far as the GDPR, which I'll explain in a second, we could use California's, which is the CCPA. I think for the U.S. realistically, that's going to be what most states are going to gravitate toward is the CCPA, which California does. But the GDPR is Europe's General Data Protection Regulations, and they started theirs in early on. Well, I say early on, 10 years ago. But in 2018, for example, to give you guys an example, 2018, the European Union required companies to ask about cookies. And I know if you've been online, you know cookies, you clear your cookies or whatever on your computer. Hopefully you do. If not, check it out. But now that's a global thing, and it's because of the GDPR. Basically, if companies, online companies were doing business in Europe and in the US, they went ahead and updated it, if that makes sense. But basically, the California law, you can see there both you have a right to access your information in California, not in Texas, but here in California. If you live in California, good luck. You get to do that. Both, if you see online that you don't like what they're collecting in California or the European Union, you have the right to ask that company to delete that information. And both the European Union and California allow you to opt out of them collecting your data. But there's kind of a difference. And so where the European Union user can lock their data prior to it being collected, it's almost you got to ask us first. Here in the States, in the United States, even in California, they'll collect your data and then you got to ask them to opt out. Does that make sense? So one's like blocking it from ever happening, and then you can opt in if you want to. The other one's it's happening and you have to then say, no, don't do that. I don't know if hope I explained that well.
Yeah, it's like fixing it after it's already a problem.
Exactly. So I think even in the US, that's going to continue to be the model. That's just my guess.
So, in our daily lives, what platforms should we at least be aware of if we're not experts in this?
Okay, this is where we look into who's tracking what. Basically, so Google is tracking you on 85.6 of the top 50,000 websites on the planet. That's a big number to me. And you can see Facebook will be next, and then Adobe, Amazon, etc. But there's other things that you need to know about. 90.4% of apps share data with at least one third party, and 35% of them share data with third parties with 10 or more. So if you are on Google, they are also sharing your information with third parties. Does that make sense? That's why you get all those target ads, or Facebook, like you said. Now that is kind of changing. Some of the companies are updating because of Europe, and Australia is another big push in this update direction lately. But they are changing it. But as I looked into this, we have to be careful. What they're going to start doing is only allowing first party tracking. So what they're going to do is they're going to ask you, do you want third party tracking? And if you say no, you're still going to get first party tracking. So a lot of them, you have to be careful. Look and see if when you click on a separate site, say you're on one site and you click on an ad, because you clicked on that ad, you may now be allowing first party sharing with that ad entity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's something to be aware of, because even with the changes, they're hyping it up. Like Google's hyping it up, like, oh, this will be safer. And it will, but there are still some holes, in my opinion.
So, I really like that you did this. Can you compare Apple and Twitter for me?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter, this was an independent study done, and it's from the RDR Corporate Accountability Index from rankingdigitalrights.org. So rankingdigitalrights.org is who did this. And they went in and they have like 58 indicators that they look at to see if companies are doing what they should be doing to protect our data. And this is just a good kind of look. They also do telecoms. If you're interested, you can go on their site and look at telecoms too. But Twitter was the best and Amazon was the worst. Okay, that's just kind of, you can see it on there. So the most protective is Twitter at 53%. But we were talking about this the other day. I think that 53% is pretty low. Nobody got much above 50% protection of my data. I'm not happy with that personally, but so Twitter, what they do is they are using what I talked about before. If you click on a website, you're going to be now tracked by that website, but third party tracking is going to be eliminated on Twitter. So they're kind of ahead. Apple is also doing this. So Apple says that their users are going to get more transparency in tracking. Doesn't mean you're going to get totally protected, but you'll know about it. So I don't know if anybody has an Apple phone. If you download an app now or go to look at an app, you get like what they call a nutrition label looking thing. That's their term, nutrition label, of what's being tracked. But if anybody has read that, it is confusing, and I have a law degree. So, okay, I'm just telling you guys, from my opinion, some of it's easy. I got, okay, you're tracking me, but you really don't have a choice. If you want that app or you want to be on that platform, guess what? You got to opt in. And I still think, again, you notice on this graphing, the percentage is right at the 50%, even for the top people up there, or the top companies, I should say. And I think that that's weird. Other ones that are kind of interesting, just to give you a few, YouTube, for parents out there, is launching a some more protection for their YouTube for Kids, which I think is supposed to be better than it is now. TikTok has been sued by a bunch of different countries because of collecting data of those under 13. Amazon is building a facial recognition software that they're selling to police departments across the US. And MIT did a study of these, and they are showing that they have gender bias and also racial bias on these facial recognition trackers, which I think is going to cause major problems if police entities are using this across the board. The other big one that people don't think about, and this will be the last one I'll talk about, is telecom companies. Think AT&T, Verizon, whoever. They have ads, serve ads to their subscribers via SMS networks, and then they sell that data to third-party ad companies, and that is not going away from what I can see. So whereas Apple and Twitter are kind of updating, where at least you're only, if you click on it, now they're following you. It's not some random third party that you never clicked on. Telecoms, you're probably being tracked by a lot of third parties. So
one
keep
of the
that in mind.
questions here says, the goal of this data tracking is mostly to provide ads that are targeted. Is that something you would agree with?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Oh, okay, I see it there. So would you say the goal of they say it's for better advertisements. I'm going to be cynical. I hope I can do that. It's to make money. They want you to buy stuff, I mean, if you're talking about the consumer market, their goal is to get more eyeballs on their products to get you to buy it. And I hate to be cynical, but they say, yes, it's to target you with better ads, but target you for better ads for what? Purchasing. That's just my opinion. And I y'all can disagree totally with me, but
another way I've heard that phrased is, if you're not paying for the service, then you're the product being sold.
Yeah, there's this interesting. I have a friend who works for Nokia, and it's a Finnish company. And he was saying one way to look at it is that, a lot of companies in Europe that are doing this that don't really sell to this market over here, you may have to pay for that service, but with that payment, you get a lot better privacy protection. So, like for example, Tutanota is a email service. My husband uses it for us for our personal stuff. I'm not trying to sell it, but the reason he uses it is because with cybersecurity people, it's a lot more secure email platform, but you also have to pay for it. I don't know if that makes sense. So if we don't want to pay for it, guess what? Our privacy is not protected mostly.
So what can we do, or what should we do to be as protected as we can be?
Okay, there's a lot of things, and we are only going to scratch the surface, but phone numbers, addresses, email, and browsing history. I don't want to get too technical, but MAC is like an identifier. MAC, it's not the Apple product. There's like it's a identifier address, and so when you click on things and you search for things, there's these little identifiers that basically are there that get attached to you. So these probes can be done passively by phones or Bluetooth setups in cars if you are not turning off tracking, if your browsing history is not cleared, things like that. License plates, I think, is really kind of interesting. I don't think most people would think about license plate tracking, but ALPRs, which are automatic license plate readers, are a huge business. One of the biggest companies is actually here in Fort Worth. It's called Digital Recognition Network and Vigilant Solutions. They're owned by a company called Voss International Holdings, and their clients include law enforcement agencies and private shopping centers. And they're looking at this for an independent company that did a study. The data showed that 99.5% of the license plates that they recorded were not connected to public safety interests. They were just scanned and there was no protection. Who is this data going to? We're not quite sure. So that was scary to me. Face biometrics and face recognition are one of the new ones. Think about when you go uh, airlines to authenticate passengers, concert venues and ticket sellers may be starting to use this, retailers to track people in their stores, um, schools and summer camps to like scan people in. These are all new things that are coming up. Um, and then credit and debit card information. I think you guys probably might be aware of this, but there's fintechs. These are financial techs that'll act as intermediaries between banks and other services. They're like money management apps. So they'll look at things like your account balance, or they can track your account balance, outstanding debt, credit card numbers, transactions, consumer name, usernames, and your passwords, which I think is okay, really scary. Cookies and IPs, you guys, it's a little technical, but that again, clearing your cookies in your browsing history is a good idea. Your browser fingerprint, again, clear either private. You can turn on a private browser mode, but also clearing your history is something that's helpful. And then wireless beacons and Wi-Fi hotspots. I think you guys probably know about this. If you go sit in a cafe, not that we can do that right now, but if you did, make sure you have a VPN or something like that. If you're using like Starbucks Wi-Fi, you might be being hacked. So be careful. But not only that, think about your wireless headphones connected to your phone and how much information on your phone. Your car, if it has Bluetooth in it, all this stuff. Street views, this is Google or like Zillow. For if you go on Zillow, you can get a street view and you can look at all your that they can track back through your mortgage information. And then DNA, we kind of talked about this one, the DNA and I don't know as much, you may know more, Misty, on the DNA tracking with like those ancestry
Mm-hmm.
companies. And I know police are sometimes using that.
Yeah, so the big case was last year, maybe 2 years ago now, with the Golden State Killer. So they had DNA, they uploaded it into a public DNA profile, and you know how if you do that, you get like third or fourth cousins. They found common ancestors and then just tracked it forward to find out who had committed these murders, which I would argue is a good thing. But you need to know if you put your DNA out there publicly, somebody could be tracking it.
Well, and I'm sure in those really long, you know how you have to accept all the terms and conditions? I'm sure somewhere in there it says they're going to do it. But who reads that stuff? I mean, seriously. And if you do read it, do you understand it? It's really difficult. I think it's it's not consumer friendly at all. So I think the big thing is, look at some ways. I think one of the best ways, and that you can probably, again, other than things we listed on the previous slide, is two-factor authentication or two-step verification. So every time I log into, I have a Google email, it sends me a code to my phone and I have to open it. If I have a Dropbox account, if I log into Dropbox, it'll send me a code to my phone that I have to unlock it. So I put in a password and then I have to go to my phone, which means I always have to have my phone with me. But anytime you can protect your data a couple of different ways, do it. I think that's important, because, and just be careful what you put out there. Everybody's trying to get your data. I don't want to be, but they want to sell stuff to you. I mean, that's kind of the big thing. And it's not all for nefarious reasons, but I think, just being aware of what is being tracked, being careful what you click on, all of that is something just to kind of keep in the back of your mind.
I mean, yeah, we are still in the very early days, right, of this digital world.
Yeah.
We are all first generation digital explorers. So we're kind of figuring it out.
We're all learning, and I think that the government's learning and states are learning and companies are learning, but looking at companies, I think one thing we have to remember is what is their business model and how are they making money. Most of the business models for the big companies like a Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any of those, I mean, it's to get eyeballs on the page and to eyeballs on advertisements to make money. So I think if you look at it in simplistic terms, the analytics are set up to get the most views. And sometimes those analytics to get the most views are not the nicest things. They'll take people down rabbit holes. And as you do that, what are you clicking on and how is that affecting data collection and privacy? I think we just got to be careful.
So this is another list of just things to think about doing.
Yeah, this is from the FBI. So, and the FBI looking at, how can I be safer? If you go to their site, and I've got the websites listed there, keep your firewall turned on, install or update your antivirus software. This is one I saw as I was doing research and talking to people that work in this area. They said update. If you get an update, don't ignore that update. Update your anti-spyware technology. So if you have malware, some sort of, oh gosh, I'm blanking, those companies that'll, just blanking on them. The anti-spyware technology that you can load, like a Norton antivirus. Sorry, just had a blank. Norton antivirus. If you have any of those, keep those up to date. Install those. Keep your operating system up to date. Again, be careful what you download and turn off your computer. I know that's weird to say, but when you're done, turn it off. Don't keep it on where something passively can be collecting data in the background. So if you're not using it, turn it off. And one other thing I don't have on here, there's the National Institute of Technology, and it's the National Institute of Technology. They are the official government unit that does cybersecurity, and so they have a cybersecurity page. So if you want something besides the FBI's information, the National Institute of Technology is another good cybersecurity tool to look at, and they walk through a bunch of stuff and have some newsletters and all sorts of stuff on their information.
It's just occurring to me that if somebody's going to school for this is the perfect time to be going to school for this. Because we're going to need so many of these people soon.
The job outlook is, sorry, I've got a car that just took off really loud from my house. The job outlook for cybersecurity is really, really good. And I cannot stress that enough. The job outlook for cybersecurity people is awesome. If you want to work in computers and you like this kind of stuff and you want to make the big bucks, go into cybersecurity. I mean, hands down. And I think TCC has some programs on cybersecurity. So I'm gonna put a plug in for us.
All right, so thank you guys for joining us today. I'm about to put the link to get credit in the chat box, so make sure you click that and fill it out. That's how you get credit for showing up today. I know some of your professors are going to ask you to do a write-up, so if you don't get the link through the credit, just make sure you check with your professor about how you're going to get credit for attending. We do have a couple more in our series left this spring. We're going to talk about democracy in a couple of weeks. And then we are going to talk about what social media does to your perception of the world around you and if it makes you smarter or not. So make sure you follow that link. Leave us some feedback. If you guys have ideas about a series you'd like to see in the future, please let us know. Over the summer, we do plan for the next year. So we're looking at your ideas right now. Do you have anything to add, Professor Cox?
I think that's it. Someone asked about the bank. Look at your banks, and I'm not a bank expert, so please take this with what it is. But I think from as far as when you're working on your private computer, accessing your bank information, all the things I mentioned. If you're out and about, use a VPN. I will mention VPNs. You might look if it's a free VPN, your protection is not going to be as high as if it's a paid VPN. So paid VPN is probably a little bit better. And they have some fairly cheap ones. I know like Surfshark and all that out there, and I'm not recommending any in particular, but do some research on a VPN if you're out and about, or if you even on your home computer, if you want to just protect your data going back and forth between your bank. But I would look at your bank and question them and see what kind of protections they have. Most banks have fairly robust protection. Go with a bank that allows for they'll notify you if there's activity that looks wrong, or they basically will put a freeze on your account if there's any activity that looks wrong. I know mine, they text me and go, "Hey, did you do this? Did you make this purchase?" And I'll be like, "No," and they'll freeze it up. So I would check with your bank to see what their specific security measures are, but also beef up your home security, your phone security, doing some of the things. And look on the FBI site. The FBI side is really good. And again, the National Institutes, what do I call it? I'm just blanking on the name I just said. The National Institute of Technology has some information on that as well.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, I had not told the form that it was okay to start taking responses yet because we don't open it till the end. But I just opened it and it should be good now. So please try again. I'm sorry, that was my fault. And I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time.